Welcome back, everybody. We're really diving in deep today. Um, Looking into what it means to date as a feminist in our modern world. You've all sent us so much great material, articles, and personal stories, and even some pretty heated forum discussions. Clearly, this is something you're all thinking about a lot.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be resonating with everyone. There's this feeling that comes through that dating with your feminist values in mind, that's a whole new set of challenges. And maybe even some triumphs, too.
Okay, yeah, let's break this down. So before we get into the details, how are people even defining dating while feminist these days? Seems like maybe there are a lot of different ways to look at that.
You're totally right. There isn't just one single definition. One thing that comes to mind, though, is from that Group Nation article, that woman who said for her, it's about letting go of all these old expectations. Like she feels empowered to ask a guy out, and not get all caught up in what society says you're supposed to do.
So changing who asks who out first and who pays for dates and all of that.
Exactly. But then you see something like that story from Women's Republic where that woman was immediately shot down by a guy just for saying she was a feminist. I mean, it makes you wonder how powerful that one word can be. Do you think that that's like a bigger trend?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, is that just a gut reaction from some people, or is there like a deeper fear or misunderstanding about feminism? It's like they hear feminist and immediately jump to conclusions without even bothering to understand what it means to that person.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. We hear those negative stereotypes all the time. The man-hating, aggressive feminist, that's a total myth. There are so many different kinds of feminists. It's not just one thing. Those generalizations don't really show what it means to believe in equality between genders.
Exactly. It's not about hating men or wanting to be better than anyone. It's about advocating for equal rights and opportunities. It reminds me of that article from Elevate, where that writer put professional feminist as her job title on dating apps. That is bold. Why do you think she did that?
I think it's a good way to find out who's really on the same page as her in terms of values. It's like saying, hey, this is who I am, take it or leave it. But it does make you wonder, can you really find someone who shares your feminist values on dating apps?
Yeah, good question. On one hand, there are tons of people in there, and you can connect with people who share your interests and values. But then you hear about those women who get unsolicited pictures or those sugar daddy types. It's kind of scary.
It just shows how online spaces can reflect the power dynamics that already exist in society. It's like those negative experiences force some women to be more upfront about their values, like those women on Reddit who said they'll only date guys who identify as feminists.
Yeah, it's about setting those boundaries and expecting respect. Those are like core principles of feminism. It's not about telling someone who they should be, but knowing what you deserve and not settling for less.
Right. And that respect for yourself comes through in some of those personal stories we saw, like that woman who said she refuses to help a man finish before she does. What do you think about that?
I think it's a powerful example of putting your own needs and pleasure first in a sexual relationship, which is like the opposite of that old idea that women should be passive or submissive. Do you think that's part of a bigger change in how women are approaching sex and intimacy?
I think so. Yeah, it speaks to this growing feeling of empowerment a lot of women have, thanks in part to feminist ideas becoming more mainstream. They're challenging the old scripts about how they're supposed to act in relationship. They want to be seen as equal partners.
It's about breaking down those power imbalances that have always existed in relationships, both romantic and sexual ones. It's about having control over your own life and respecting each other, not just in the bedroom, but everywhere.
Yes, exactly. And that connects to this bigger question of how society is changing the way we all date, not just feminists.
That's true. We can't ignore how technology and evolving gender roles, and even the fact that people are getting married later, are changing dating for everyone.
Exactly. For example, Whitney L. Anderson writes that we're living in this never-ending dating generation. She thinks that societal changes and feminist ideas that allow women to put off marriage and focus on their careers might be contributing to this phenomenon.
Wow, that's really interesting. It makes you think about how we define success and happiness in relationships today. Is it still about finding the one and settling down? Or are people just taking their time to figure out what they really want?
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people are wrestling with. And it brings us back to the importance of being open and honest and self-aware when you're dating, whether or not you consider yourself a feminist.
Totally. It's about having those uncomfortable conversations early on to make sure you're both on the same page. When it comes to your values and what you expect from a relationship and your long-term goals, those can be tough conversations to have.
Yeah, they can. It's like trying to walk a tightrope, being true to your feminist values while navigating attraction and connection, which can be confusing sometimes.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between knowing what you need and being open to compromise and understanding each other.
And that's where finding and supporting allies comes in.
Yes, that article from Elevate talked about using your dating experiences to talk to men about feminism, even turning some of them into allies.
Yeah, it's about realizing that change doesn't happen by itself. We need people of all genders who are ready to listen and learn and challenge those harmful norms.
And sometimes those allies might surprise you, like that woman on Reddit who shared how her partner actually became a feminist ally after making a joke about her beliefs at first. That's really encouraging.
It shows that people can change, especially when they're exposed to different perspectives and willing to question their own assumptions.
Okay, so let's change gears for a second and talk about something that's been on my mind. Feminism is often seen in a negative light, especially when it comes to dating.
Yeah, it's true. There's that stereotype of feminists being man-haters, angry, difficult to be around. It can make it hard to even bring up your feminist beliefs when you're dating someone.
Like you always have to be defending yourself and your values before you even have a chance to connect with the other person.
Right. It can be exhausting. Makes you wonder if it's even worth bringing up at all.
You feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying to figure out if the other person is even open-minded enough to have a conversation about feminism.
But remember that woman from the Elevate article who put professional feminist as her job on dating apps? That's a pretty bold statement, but it also helps her filter out the people who aren't compatible with her.
Like she's saying, this is who I am. If you don't like it, move on.
Exactly. It's about owning your identity, even if it means getting rejected. It's better to be single than to compromise your values for a relationship that isn't based on mutual respect.
That's a great reminder. But what about those Reddit users who talked about actively looking for partners who are also feminists, or at least supportive of feminist values? They're trying to build relationships that are based on that shared understanding.
Right? They want to find those people who get it, who are willing to challenge those gender norms and work towards a more equal world together. It's about living your values in your personal life, too.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges of dating as a feminist. But what about the opportunities? How do you think feminism empowers people in their dating lives?
That's a good question. One of the biggest things is that it gives people the power to be in control of their own lives and make their own choices.
You realize you have a voice, and your needs and desires matter and deserve to be met.
Exactly. You have the confidence to set boundaries, to say what you need, and to walk away from situations that don't feel right.
We see this in the personal stories we talked about, like that woman who refused to follow those traditional expectations about who pays for dates or who's responsible for the emotional work in the relationship.
Yeah, they're pushing back against those outdated gender roles, trying to create a more balanced and fair dynamic in their relationships.
It's about deciding for themselves what a good relationship looks like instead of just doing what society tells them to do.
And that's really powerful. You realize that you have the right to choose the kind of relationship you want and to set the rules for how you want to be treated.
It's about creating a partnership where both people feel valued and respected and are free to be themselves.
I love that. It's about creating a space where both of you can grow and learn together, helping each other become better versions of yourselves.
Okay, let's step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture. How do you think feminism is shaping the future of dating and relationships overall?
That's a great question. I think we're already seeing a shift towards more equal relationships where those traditional gender roles are being questioned and renegotiated.
Yeah, we see it in everything from who asks who out on a date to who manages the money to how couples split the housework.
And it's not just about dividing everything 50-50. It's about making sure both partners have an equal say in how the relationship works.
It's about working together and supporting each other, both emotionally and practically.
And I think that's what makes this whole conversation about dating while feminist so exciting. It's about pushing the boundaries and questioning those old assumptions and creating new possibilities for connection and intimacy based on equality and respect.
It's like rewriting the rules of the game.
Exactly. And the game's always changing. So we have to stay curious and open-minded. And most importantly, stay true to ourselves.
I love that. It's about embracing the journey, even with all its ups and downs, and trusting that we'll find our way to relationships that are fulfilling and authentic.
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is this recurring theme of women feeling empowered to say no to those traditional gender roles in their dating lives.
For sure, they're taking the initiative, setting boundaries, defining what they want in a partner and in a relationship.
They're not waiting for someone to sweep them off their feet. They're going out and making the relationships they want happen.
They're embracing their agency and their power.
And it's not just about what they're doing, it's how they're doing it. There's this sense of confidence and self-assurance that comes with embracing feminist values.
They're not afraid to speak their minds, to challenge the status quo.
They're owning their feminism and using it as a tool to create the relationships they want.
I think that's something worth celebrating.
Absolutely. It's beautiful to see women embracing their power and using it to make positive changes in their own lives and in the world.
Reading those personal stories, especially from those Reddit threads, really highlighted how important it is to have spaces where women feel safe to share their experiences, ask questions, support each other.
It's so important to have those spaces both online and offline where women can connect with other feminists and feel like they're being seen and heard.
It's about building community, fostering solidarity, and recognizing that we're not alone in this.
It's about creating a network of support and encouragement that helps us navigate these complex issues together.
It's about creating a world where women can feel empowered to date on their own terms without being afraid of judgment or consequences.
That's the kind of world I want to live in.
Me too. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. Are you ready to move on to the next part of our conversation?
Absolutely. Let's keep exploring these interesting ideas and see what other insights we can find.
Great. We'll be right back after a quick break to delve deeper into the complexities of dating while feminist.
It's really interesting how these personal stories connect to those big societal changes. We're seeing how relationships are changing, partly because of feminist ideas becoming more accepted.
Yeah, that reminds me of that Anderson article, how she talked about feminism maybe contributing to this never-ending dating generation.
Yeah, her argument is pretty out there. She says that by encouraging women to focus on their careers and wait to get married, feminism might actually be delaying those traditional relationship milestones for everyone. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I see what she's saying. We have so many more choices now. So maybe it makes sense that people are taking longer to figure out what they want in a partner and in life. But do you think those societal shifts are the only reason? Or are there other things going on too?
It's definitely complicated. Lots of factors at play. She actually quotes Dennis Prager, who says that feminism has created what is undoubtedly the weakest generation of women in American history.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. I get that he's saying women might be relying too much on men these days, but calling them the weakest generation seems a bit harsh. What do you think he means by that?
It seems like he thinks that those traditional gender roles equal strength, which is a whole other conversation. But I think it's important to remember that Anderson is just presenting one point of view. It's not like a universal truth.
Right, it's just one perspective. And there are definitely counter-arguments, like the fact that women are accomplishing so much more now in fields that used to be dominated by men. That doesn't sound very weak to me.
Exactly. It's about having the freedom to choose what success means to you, whether that includes marriage and family or not.
And that freedom of choice is a direct result of what feminists have been fighting for generations, breaking free from those old expectations. But speaking of challenges, that article by Emma Jane Unsworth in The Guardian talked about some really disturbing stuff about online dating for women, like how common it is to get those unsolicited explicit photos.
It's like a form of harassment online. It's sad that those kinds of things still happen.
And then there's that whole sugar daddy thing she mentioned. It's kind of worrying that some of those platforms seem to be encouraging those kinds of transactional relationships. What do you think is behind those trends?
I think it shows that there's still this power dynamic that exists in some parts of the dating world. It makes it even more important for women to set boundaries and demand respect.
Like those women on Reddit who said they'll only date guys who share their feminist values. It's about choosing your partners carefully, making sure they align with your beliefs.
It's about not compromising your values just to be in a relationship, and it's about calling out those behaviors that perpetuate those harmful power dynamics.
And sometimes those challenges mean pushing back against those traditional norms. Like that woman who said she wouldn't help a man climax before she did. It's a pretty bold statement, but it also points to a bigger shift in how women are thinking about intimacy.
It's a great example of putting your own pleasure and needs first in a sexual relationship. It challenges that idea that women should be passive or submissive in the bedroom.
Yeah, it's about taking ownership of your own body and sexuality, which is a core part of feminist thought, but it also makes you wonder how men react to those kinds of challenges.
That's a really interesting question. I think it probably depends on the person and how they view gender roles as equality. Some men might feel threatened by it, while others might see it as a chance to grow and understand their partner's needs better.
It seems like having those conversations requires a lot of open and honest communication, which can be tough when you're just starting to date someone. How can people talk about those things without feeling like they're giving a lecture on feminism?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not about pushing your beliefs on someone. It's more about sharing your values and seeing if you're compatible. You could just mention something you read or an experience you had that relates to feminist issues.
Yeah, just find a way to bring it up naturally while you're getting to know each other.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where you can talk about those things openly and respectfully, even if you don't agree on everything.
It's interesting how these individual choices we're talking about are both influencing and pushing back against those bigger societal trends. It's like this back and forth between personal agency and the weight of expectations.
It's like we're constantly trying to figure out those expectations, both on our own and as a society, and those expectations are always changing. Think about how different dating is now compared to even a few decades ago.
Totally. We have online dating, social media shifting gender roles. It's a whole new world out there.
And it can be both exciting and scary, like navigating uncharted waters.
Speaking of technology, remember that anecdote about the guy who held the elevator for his female colleague and she thought it was sexist?
Oh, yeah. It just shows how sensitive we can be to those little things and how easy it is to misinterpret each other.
Because sometimes holding a door open is just that it's not a comment on a woman's abilities. But how do we figure out those subtle cues and avoid those misunderstandings, especially when we're dating?
I think it comes down to communication and giving each other the benefit of the doubt, being open to hearing different perspective and understanding that our actions don't always reflect our intentions.
It's about recognizing that we all come to these interactions with our own baggage and biases.
And those biases can affect how we see even the smallest things. We need to be aware of those biases and be willing to ask for clarification when something feels off.
So it's not just about knowing our own biases, but also being open to feedback and changing our behavior if needed.
Exactly. It's a constant learning process.
And realizing that we're going to make mistakes and disagree sometimes.
But in the end, it's about trying to build relationships that are based on respect, understanding, and a shared desire to grow.
I love that. It's about realizing that we're all works in progress and that relationships give us a chance to learn and grow together. But how do we balance that individual growth with the needs of the relationship?
That's a great question. It's about finding that balance between being yourself and being open to your partner's influence and perspectives.
It's about recognizing that personal growth doesn't have to happen alone. It can actually be stronger and more supported within a loving and respectful relationship.
Absolutely. It's about creating a space where both partners feel comfortable exploring who they are and supporting each other's journeys of self-discovery.
You know, something I noticed is that the word feminist doesn't always come up directly in these conversations. Sometimes it's more about the actions and behaviors that align with feminist values.
That's a good observation. It seems like feminism is becoming less about the label and more about the actual experience of equality and empowerment.
It's like feminism is becoming woven into the fabric of modern dating, even if people don't always say the word feminist.
Exactly. It's less about making big statements and more about the small ways we challenge gender norms and create more balanced relationships.
I think that's a really positive thing. It means that feminist values are becoming more normal, which is what we want to see.
Yeah, it's about making those values so common that they're no longer seen as radical or controversial, but just the way things should be.
That's a beautiful thought, and something worth working towards.
It is. Okay, we've covered a lot in this second part of our conversation. What resonated with you the most from these sources? What do you think are the most important takeaways about the challenges and opportunities of dating as a feminist today?
You know what really sticks with me is that feminism is about choice. It's not about following a set of rules. It's about giving people the freedom to decide what a fulfilling life and relationship means to them.
I love that. It's recognizing that there's no right way to date or be in a relationship. It's about finding what works for you and your partner, no matter what society says.
And those choices are going to change as we navigate this ever-changing world of dating and relationships.
So how do we deal with those changes while staying true to our feminist values?
I think it's staying curious, being open to new ideas, and willing to adapt. It's about having those tough conversations, challenging our own beliefs, and supporting each other along the way.
It's about realizing that we're all in this together.
And that together we can create a world where dating and relationships are truly equal and fulfilling for everyone.
That's beautifully said. Okay, let's take a moment to think about what we've talked about, and then we'll move on to the final part of our deep dive where we'll explore some even more nuanced and thought-provoking ideas.
You know, it's amazing how these conversations about feminism and dating, they just keep evolving. There's no easy answer or perfect solution. It's really about finding what works for you while staying true to yourself.
Absolutely. Everyone's figuring it out as they go along. Right. And that's what makes it so interesting to talk about Each of these sources we've looked at gives us a different perspective on dating as a feminist. The challenges, the
It's
successes,
like we've created this big picture made up of all these individual stories, each one adding something new and important.
and those individual experiences, they're both influenced by and influencing those bigger changes happening in society. We can't ignore how technology and changing gender roles and expectations about relationships, all of that is affecting how we date today.
So true. I mean, think about how different dating is now compared to even a generation ago.
It's a whole new world out there, full of possibilities, but also new challenges.
And that can feel really exciting, but also kind of scary, especially if you're trying to navigate it all while staying true to your feminist beliefs. Do you think feminists face any unique challenges in today's dating world?
It's a good question. I think one challenge is how people see the word feminist. It can have a lot of baggage negative connotations or just plain misunderstandings.
You know, something that I keep thinking about is this idea that calling yourself a feminist might actually make dating harder. It's
Hmm.
like that quote from the Women's Republic article. Your identity as a feminist isn't scaring all the potential partners away. It's scaring all the bad potential partners away. What do you think of that?
It's a great way to look at it. Instead of seeing it as something that pushes people away, it's actually helping you filter out the ones who aren't right for you. It's about being yourself and trusting that the right people will appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like that friend of Unsworth's who went on that terrible date with the hedge fund guy from that sugar daddy website. Talk about a close call. It really shows how important it is to stick to your values, even when you're having those tough dating experiences.
It's about making sure your dating choices align with your beliefs, even if it means being more selective or taking more risks. It's about having the strength to walk away from situations that don't feel right.
So for everyone out there struggling to find that special someone, don't be afraid to be picky. Have high standards, wait for a partner who really gets you and respects your feminist values. Don't be afraid to put your needs first in a relationship.
Exactly. Don't let anyone tell you that you should be passive or settle for less. You deserve the best. It's about taking back your power and knowing your worth.
And it's about having those open and honest conversations, being upfront about your feminist beliefs. Even if it feels a little awkward or scary, do you have any tips on how to have those conversations in a way that feels genuine?
I think it's about finding ways to bring those topics up naturally. As you're getting to know someone, you could mention an article you read or a podcast, or just share your thoughts on something relevant.
Yeah, it's about finding those shared interests and values that can lead to a deeper conversation about feminism and how it fits into your life. It's not about preaching, it's about starting a dialogue.
Exactly. Be open about your own experiences and make the other person feel comfortable sharing theirs too.
It's about being vulnerable, sharing your stories, connecting with those who understand you, support you, challenge you to grow. It's about realizing that we're all learning and growing together.
And you never know, you might even inspire someone else along the way.
If you're feeling lost or discouraged, don't forget that there's a whole community of feminists out there going through the same things, creating new possibilities for love and equality. You are not alone.
Keep learning, keep growing, keep those conversations going, and most importantly, be true to who you are.
What a great way to wrap things up. This has been a fantastic deep dive. I hope everyone listening feels as empowered and inspired as I do. This conversation has really given me a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep those deep dives coming and stay curious.